Welcome back to the Pressure Washing Pastor Podcast. I'm your honored host, Joshua Brown, and it is my mission to track down incredible people and bring them on the show. Today, you're going to hear of a legend, a superstar in the NBA, Joshua Howard. He is going to be on the show. Just kidding. But we do have an incredible Josh Howard. When you hear his story of how God has used his life, put him in strategic positions to plant churches, raise up new Christians who make disciples that make disciples in India and different places all over the planet, you're really going to be blown away. And I've got an ask for you. If you know anybody that has an incredible testimony, loves the Lord, and uses their business to fulfill the Great Commission, I want you to introduce them to me. I need more business owners to share how they use their platform, their business, their mindset to be able to create jobs, make disciples, and serve the city. But without further ado, I'm going to bring on my friend, Joshua Howard. What's up, my friend?
Hey, man. I love the intro, by the way. You have no idea how many times people have been disappointed when Josh Howard is coming in, and it's a small white guy who never played in the NBA.
Yeah, what's going to be even funnier is I'm going to make an AI of Joshua Howard and your face integrated, and we'll just use as the thumbnail will be Josh Howard.
That would be great.
Me, let's go, so anyway, but welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, man. It's good to be here, buddy.
Hey, first question's sometimes the most difficult to ask, but who is Josh Howard?
Yeah, that's who knows, bro. You know what I mean? I mean, at the end of the day, man, my life, even though I've made a lot of mistakes and failures over the years, and the man I am is not even close to the man I want to be. But at the end of the day, I want my life to be laser focused on Jesus and his mission and my family, really. And so I'm a husband and a father. My wife, we've been married 16 years. We've got 3 kids, incredible kids that have their own unique personalities and giftings that we're trying to raise up and launch out into the world to make kingdom impacts. I've lived on the mission field for the last 16 years, and we've actually just recently moved stateside 2 weeks ago for the first time. The first time in my married life, we're living in America, which is nuts. My kids were born and raised overseas. This is the first time they're living here, and so it's been quite the transition, to say the least. But yeah, I honestly love to try my best to see as many people as possible raised up to live their mission in the world and to really be a disciple who makes disciples, and live out that calling that Jesus has given all of us. And that's really what we've tried to focus our lives on for the last 16 years. Awesome.
Could you share your story with us and maybe how you come to know Jesus?
Yeah, man. So I grew up in a pretty broken home, Josh. My parents were divorced at 4 years old. When I was 4 years old, my dad and mom weren't able to make it. And my dad really wasn't around much when I was a kid. Him and I now, spoiler alert, but him and I now have a very good relationship. And him and I reconciled when I was about 17 or 18 and actually have a very good relationship. He's come back to the Lord actually later in life. And so that's all been very good. But growing up, though, was in a very broken home. Like I said, it was just me and my mom. She was a single mom. We lived with my grandparents, her mom and dad. But by God's grace, my grandparents were incredible Christian people. My grandpa was a deacon in the church. He was a steel worker, farmer, blue collar through and through, strong-hearted man. Things that country songs are written about. You know what I mean? That was my grandpa. And then my dad's mom and dad were actually, now are very devout followers of Jesus. And my dad's brother was a pastor as well. And so through all those influences, I ended up going to church every single week from the time I was negative 9 months old until now. But growing up, because of all that pain of kind of not having my dad around much and not having that kind of family foundation, it was a difficult, especially in my teenage years. It became pretty difficult in my heart and my soul really trying to work through a lot of that stuff. I gave my life to Jesus at an early age. I was 8 years old when I really felt him pulling me to follow him. That's when I was baptized, was at that point. But really, when I started to get about 11, 12, 13 years old, I really began to live a double life, honestly. I would be one person on Sunday and a different person throughout the week. I really did want to follow Jesus, but honestly had a lot of habits in my life. Me and a buddy late at night one night when I was 11 years old stumbled across pornography for the first time on HBO. That really honestly began a journey that stuck with me all throughout junior high and high school and into the very beginning of college. Because I was really after love and affection, I ended up, having many different relationships in high school with different girls and things like that. And honestly, it just ended up not being a life that I was living, honoring God. I preached my first sermon when I was 13, and that's when I really felt God calling me into ministry. And so if you would have asked me from 13 until 18 what I wanted to be when I got older, it was a preacher. But the sad thing is I would say that with my lips, but my life I was living very differently. I wasn't living in such a way that would bring honor to God with my life. If you would have asked any of my friends that I grew up with, that I played baseball with or whatever, they all would have said that I was the Christian on the team. But they also saw me living a very different life that really didn't reflect God's values or heart. When I was 16, Josh, that's when everything really began to come crashing down around me. So like I said, I grew up with my mom's mom and dad, my grandparents, that father or that grandfather that I had that was kind of that solid, strong person in my life. A couple weeks after I turned 16, he died of brain cancer. That shook our family, man. He was the pillar and rock of our family. And about 2 months after that, my aunt, who her and her husband, my uncle, were incredible leaders in my life. My uncle was my youth pastor. It was my mom's brother. He was my youth pastor. She was arrested 2 months after my grandfather died for having an inappropriate relationship with a 13-year-old kid in our youth group. And that blew everything up. My mom was a mess. She lost her sister-in-law, her brother emotionally, and her dad within a 3-month period. She didn't know how to cope with all of that. She was also going through a horrible marriage at the time that was just blowing up internally. A year or two after that, she got divorced. And so during that season, she became a closet alcoholic, and really just was not able to really deal with all those emotions very well. And so at 16, I found myself losing really the father figure in my life, my grandfather. The other father figure in my life was my uncle, my youth pastor, and he was gone emotionally, losing his dad and his wife within a 2-month period like that. My aunt went to prison. I literally never saw her or talked to her again after that. And so it was like at 16, and I don't have any brothers or sisters. So everything blew up around me. I was living this double life. And that's really the point, man, where God came in and reached into my life, bro, and became the father that I always longed to have. He became my source of strength, the one that I was able to open up to, the one that I was able to pour my heart out to. And it was during that season that everything really began to change for me, where I really became serious about my faith. And when everything blows up around you like that, Josh, I mean, honestly, you've really got two paths. A lot of people will reject God, blame God, and say, I'm never going that way again because he allowed all this to happen. Or you just lean all in. You know what I mean? And by God's grace, his spirit pulled me strong in that direction. I mean, I'll be honest, there were times where I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was doubting a lot of different things, but the Father, man, came down and wrapped his arms around me and really pulled me close to him during that season. And so that's when I began to really try to shape things up, and God began to work on me. Even though the addictions in my life continued to go up and down throughout the next few years, but God really began to do a work in me and change me from the inside out. And I would say that was really my true conversion season, even though I gave my life to Jesus at a young age, that's really where my heart began to change drastically. It's really when my life began to change drastically, and God became my father. Jesus became king of my life. And that's really where I began to say, God, wherever you want me, whatever you want me to do, I don't care what part of the world you want me in. You are the only one there for me. And I want to give you all that I have. And so that's really where everything began to change, brother, at that point.
What up, everybody? Hey, as you guys know, we are on mission to help purpose-driven business owners get better 1% every single day. Well, today I want to take a moment to discuss our personal favorite business management app that we're in partnership with, House Call Pro. We have been with them since 2017, and with their all-in-one CRM, it has empowered us to continuously grow. Unlike other apps, it's actually simple to use, easy, while you have all the tools in-house. From invoicing, being able to take payments, scheduling, and customer communications, it is truly going to help you provide a 5-star experience, which we all know is how you're going to keep those loyal customers. If you are purposely looking to get better today, click the link below and get 50% off your first 2 months.
Speak to the 16-year-old who finds themselves in your situation. No family. They feel like God's left them. Maybe they're even caught in some type of addiction. What advice would you share?
Yeah. You need to get alone and be honest with God. Like, there were times I remember going out in my backyard, man, at 16, 17 years old and yelling at the top of my lungs, man. Like, and what I learned in that season, through David, especially in the Psalms, we look at David and think he's this, rock solid leader who had it all figured out and all this stuff. But you read some of the Psalms, man, and there were deep seasons of doubt, of anger, of frustration. And God's a big boy. He can take it. And so if you find yourself doubting, angry, frustrated, man, let all that out. God wants to hear your heart. He knows it already. He knows what you're feeling inside. He feels it with you. He is with you. He has not left you. And so let it all out. Communicate with him. Talk to him. If you need to yell, yell. If you need to get angry, get angry. But be honest with God. Tell him how you're feeling, and don't shut him out. He wants to be with you. He wants to hold you in that season. And it wasn't until I was an adult, guys, where God gave me this gift where I was in a prayer time one time, and he took me back in my mind to those seasons. And rather than me being alone, he gave me these images in my mind of Jesus sitting next to me when I got the news of my grandfather, Jesus sitting next to me when I got the news about my aunt, him crying with me, him holding me. And it made me realize I was never alone. He never left me. He was with me in my bedroom when I was crying. He was with me outside when I was screaming out. Like, he does not leave you. And so if you feel alone, you need to know you are not alone. He is with you. He is holding you. He's crying with you. He's feeling your pain. And you need to be open and honest with him and talk with somebody who can help you through this season. God ended up bringing some incredible people into my life at about 17 or 18 that I was able to process some of this stuff with, talk with them, talk to them about these things. And so I just want you to know, if you're listening and you find yourself in that situation, whether you're 16 or 60, you need to know you're not alone. The Spirit of God does not leave you or forsake you, and he does want to hear your heart. And so just let it out and just know that he's with you.
There's been times where we grow up and we go to church or we meet Christians, but we never hear the gospel. For anyone that's listening and they just need a framework to understand, man, what is the good news? Yeah. What is the gospel of Jesus Christ? Would you mind sharing that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, guys, we live, obviously, after hearing part of my story, and I know some of your stories that are listening, we live in a broken, screwed up, messed up world, man. And we do everything we can to get out of this brokenness. Like, we will try everything we can. I tried relationships. I tried girls. I tried addiction. I tried even religion, not relationship with Jesus, religion, keeping all the rules, trying to make sure that everything's buttoned up and neat. And those things that we use to try to get out of it, man, are like bungee cords that just rip us back into brokenness. You might feel good on a Friday night, but Saturday morning, you feel broken and guilty and shameful again. Like, you may feel good when you're in the middle of some sort of sinful activity, but then afterwards, the brokenness that it leaves and the hole that it leaves inside your heart is there. But the good news of Jesus is really twofold. One, he never created the world to be that way. Number one, he created it perfect with no sin, no evil, no death, no sickness, none of this junk that brings so much pain, no war, none of this junk was in the world when he originally created it. But we decided we wanted to go our own way, man. You know, we wanted to live our own life. We wanted to go our own direction. We wanted to carve our own path. And so we decided that we were going to go the opposite direction of where God wanted us to go as humanity. And that's actually what birthed evil and sin and brokenness in the world. But Jesus loved us too much to leave us like that. And so God sent his son Jesus into the world to live in the brokenness with us. Like, and everywhere he went, man, Jesus made it his mission to heal broken things. Like, that's what he did. He healed broken things for a living. So people that he would come across that were sick or hurting, he would heal. People that he would come across that were shame-filled and guilt-ridden, he would take away that shame and guilt and heal their heart. People that were in horrible circumstances, he would come in and bring them hope and courage and restoration. Jesus lived in the midst of brokenness and made it his full-time job healing brokenness. But then we rejected him again, right? Like, humanity put him up on a cross, but the opposite effect took place of what they were hoping to do. What ended up happening, friends, on that cross is Jesus took every broken thing in this world, man, every broken thing in your heart, all my sin, all my shame, all your sin and shame. And a great exchange takes place when you put your faith in Jesus. He takes all of your brokenness, all your sin, all your guilt, all your shame. And he says, in exchange for that, he will give you peace and comfort and forgiveness and restoration. And he will bring healing to that broken heart. And so, I mean, what a horrible exchange for him, but what a great exchange for us. But that's what shows his love, is he's willing to take all that junk upon himself, be punished for it so you don't have to be, and then give you hope and love and forgiveness in its place. And friends, let me tell you something. For me, that was the greatest news possible, because all I had inside of me was all this bitterness and anger and sin and guilt and shame. And Jesus began to clean all that out and give me his hope and love and forgiveness instead. And honestly, at the end of the day, friends, that is the good news of Jesus. And not only that, but he gives you a new purpose when you give your life to him and sets you on a new pathway to make great impact on this planet so that you can bring restoration and healing to as many other people as possible. And there is no greater purpose in the world, man, than to see other people experience that healing, that forgiveness, and that grace that Jesus has for us. And so, Joshua, in a nutshell, that's really, really the gospel.
Yeah, it's so good. And I think as you're sharing, we're reminded that we're loved. I've spent the last 2 months inside the book of Kings, and you just see assassination after assassination after assassination, and then bad king after bad king after bad king. And it's like, it's the same story that takes place over and over again. God loves people. He sends prophets to tell them to turn away from worthless idols. People are actually, like, when you read the book of Kings, it's shocking to see that people can actually sacrifice their children to their gods. And this past week, I'm helping a family move. The father had been married for over 40 years to this lady, 4 kids, and is leaving to go. I want to be very kind on what I say, but basically a new vision for his life. And it's like, people still sacrifice their families to the altar of self. And when we read the Old Testament, we're like, man, how could someone sacrifice their children to a God who can't provide them anything? Well, bro, look at all the fatherlessness inside of America. It happens every day. You know, my dad offered to pay for my abortion, not be in my life, so he could have sex, do whatever he wants to do. He was sacrificing me to his God of sexual desires. All right. So we still sacrifice our children. And it's like, man, if you're saved, if you're still listening to this, I checked out Ignite. I think it's network.org. Is that right? I checked out.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's like family on the resources. There's like, unless it was at discipleship, it was discipleship.org.
Okay.
You can go there and you can get a blueprint on how to lead your family inside of devotions. And it's like, in order to be a follower of Jesus Christ, you've got to kill things that are actually grabbing your attention and taking you away from the intentionality of leading your family. But anyway, discipleship.org, you can go there and get a family blueprint.
Yes, I didn't know where you're going, Joshua, but the family blueprint is on discipleship.org. The Ignite website is about our multiplication work and movement work. But yeah, discipleship.org has a family blueprint there that's incredible that will help you lead your family better.
Hey, I'm going to interrupt for a second because we've got a phenomenal opportunity for you. If you've been thinking about opening your own pressure washing company, I'd like to invite you to a free webinar. There we'll talk about the pros and cons of opening a pressure washing, and you'll get to chat with our team about whether or not you should launch a pressure washing company in your city or not. To register for this free event, go to pressurewashingpastor.com, scroll down to the little registration button, it's blue, and click on it, and we'll take care of the rest. I look forward to seeing you there. Have a great day. Now back to our show.
Yeah, Long Story Short was the first. Are you familiar with Long Story Short?
No.
It's yeah, you've been in India, but like in North America, it's like been the textbook from a lot of the Reformed writers and so forth. And so it's one that our family has used for a long time. Long story short, if you're listening, if you're a dude, lead your family, say no to yourself and say yes to raising them up in a home that's going to love Jesus. And so it's such a powerful. So I got a question for you. You've done a great job sharing your testimony, sharing the gospel. And I found you in the midst of a transition that's taken place over the last 16 years. Can you share with me what a 16-year-old kid was able to accomplish because of Jesus for his own glory? Just kind of go through the last 16 years and just share, like, when you give your life to Christ, this is the fruit that can be produced over the course of time. Would you mind sharing a little bit of what you've seen God do?
Yeah, man. Yeah, so I moved to India when I was 21. Met a beautiful Indian lady who, for whatever reason, decided that she wanted to spend the rest of her life with me. She may be regretting that now, but she made that decision for whatever reason that she wanted to spend her life with me. And I moved there thinking that I was going to be this big bad missionary that came and saved everybody. But honestly, what ended up happening was, man, the Indian believers early on taught me how to follow Jesus. That's what really happened. Like, I met these men and women, bro, that were so dedicated and faithful to Jesus. Their love for Jesus made my love for him look a whole lot more like liking Jesus rather than loving him. And, you know, I got to India realizing I'd never made a disciple in my life. I thought I had done a lot of ministry, but I never knew how to make a disciple. I never knew how to, you know, really lead someone to faith and then disciple them to be a disciple who goes and makes more disciples. And the Indian believers really taught me what that looks like. They taught me how to be faithful to Jesus. And so for the first few years, brother, it really was about learning from them and becoming a disciple that's actually worth reproducing at the end of the day. And that's a tough question that I had to deal with. I realized pretty quickly that even if I made disciples who looked like me, that would not have been a good thing for the church. And for those of you listening, I want you to ask yourself that question. It's a question I had to come to terms with when I first moved to India. And really, here's the question. If everyone in your church or your community prayed as much as you pray, loved like you love, talked the way that you talk, shared the gospel as often as you do, fasted like you fast, love their family the way you love your family, would that be a positive thing or a negative thing for the community? And I'll be honest, man, my wife would be the first one to tell you the last thing India needed 16 years ago was a couple hundred Josh Howards running around. Like, that's the last thing they needed. And so the Indian believers, though, began to teach me, and we began to pray and fast together, man, to say, God, we know you want to reach every lost person across the world with the gospel. We know that's your heart, Father. And so what does that practically look like? Because we realized pretty quickly, Joshua, that, I mean, what we were doing in India was never going to get the Great Commission completed. Like, I pulled out my calculator one day. I forget who said it, but they said, hey, what if we could reach 100,000 people a year with the gospel? Wouldn't that be incredible? And I was like, that would be unbelievable. Like, could you imagine reaching that many people every year? And so I pull out my calculator and put 100,000 people a year into 1.3 billion Indians at the time, and realized that if we did that and just added them and didn't make disciples, it would take us 13,000 years to reach India at 100,000 people a year. And it's like, well, something's going to have to change, right? And so we began to shift after meeting several mentors. And I read a book by a guy named Ying Kai, where he told the whole story of how they shifted to multiplication in China. And basically, man, I just muttered out this little prayer to the Lord. And I said, God, if you can do something like that in China, I know you can do it here where we're at. And so we began to give it a go, shifting from addition to multiplication. How can we multiply disciples in churches? How can we raise up men and women, ordinary men and women, not just professionals, but ordinary people all across the world who can make disciples who make disciples? And so it was about 10 years ago when we launched out into that, Joshua. And I'll make a long story short here. But over the last 10 years, we have now seen well over 30,000 new churches started in the last 10 years, which these are not brick and mortar churches. These are smaller house churches that have multiplied all over the region, and they continue to multiply. I mean, last year alone, I think we saw in 2023, I think we saw somewhere in the ballpark of 9,500 churches started, somewhere in that ballpark, just last year alone. The first half of this year, we've already seen, I think we're now close to somewhere in the 6,000 range this year so far that has already been started. Last year alone, we saw about 56,000 people come to faith, but those are people who have come to faith that have been trained on how to go make more disciples. So it's not just adding them to the church, it's raising them up to be disciples who go make more disciples, who are able to plant churches. And so God has done remarkable, unbelievable things in order to see that happen. But let me give a quick caveat here before we go into anything else. Joshua, it's really easy for a white guy on a podcast in America to take credit for something that God's done like this. And the truth is, man, we have hundreds of thousands of people all over South Asia that are faithful, courageous, bold followers of Christ, who no one on this podcast listening right now, you'll never get to meet those guys and gals. You'll never get to see their face. You may never get to hear their story personally. But they are the ones that God is using. And so I just get the honor of representing them on a podcast like this or telling their story. There are thousands upon thousands of unknown, ordinary men and women, just like the early disciples, who are uneducated. Some of them you would never expect to see great, huge things out of. But God is using them to radically change entire cultures and villages and cities in South Asia. God reminded me a long time ago, man. He said, Josh, did you forget that I love to do extraordinary things through ordinary people? And God has raised up hundreds of thousands of ordinary people that are doing incredible work in South Asia. So anyway, that's the quick version of the story.
Have you found a church?
Here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We just attended the first time this last week. And so, we found a church here locally we're going to try to get plugged into.
The major difference between the church that you went to in India and the one that you visited or you went to on Sunday, without throwing rocks, but what just the facts, no rocks, just facts.
Yeah.
What's the difference? Because my son and I literally, I want to say this morning, actually we're working out and I said, do you think we do church the way church should be done? And he's like, no.
Yeah.
And he's 16. And so, he listens to John Mark Comer, practicing the way and so forth. What's the major difference? What are we missing? What have you noticed?
That's great. Well, let me say this. Rather than saying the particular church I visited Sunday versus what we experienced in India,
it's safe.
I just don't know this church well enough to say much. We attended one time, you know what I mean? So, but I can say with certainty what the major difference is between what we experienced in India versus just the American church in general. I can say that. And what we encounter in churches across the country. And there are a few different reasons. I've had people ask me a lot, Joshua, like, why do you think we're seeing the crazy numbers we are in South Asia and we're not seeing it in the West like that? And I think there are a few major differences. Number one, our people in India, man, they pray and fast like nobody's business. They are praying and fasting in order to see radical spiritual breakthrough. And I just don't see that in the average church in America, where all the people are praying and fasting like that. You may have a leader here and there who's praying and fasting like that, but the general population in a church is not praying and fasting like that. But we have churches all over India where all of them are praying and fasting like that, not just the leader, but the people as well. And so, I mean, my best multipliers in India, man, they're spending at least 2 hours a day alone with Jesus. They're spending 1 or 2 days a week fasting for spiritual breakthrough in their city and their community. I mean, their spiritual life and their relationship with Jesus is their top priority. It's not just a cherry on top of everything else they're doing. And what we find in the West a lot of times is that out of all the stories we're living, right, the Jesus mission story, which I had a buddy say this just yesterday to me. He said, Josh, I feel like the mission of Jesus ends up being a very minor role that we play, and all the other stories we're living is way more important than Jesus's mission. And in India, we see a lot of the people flip that completely on its head, where the Jesus mission is the main story they're living, and everything else is a minor role or a side role that they're playing. But the main role is Jesus's mission. And so that's definitely one big issue, brother. I think number two is that, man, our guys and gals in India, bro, are throwing the seeds of the gospel everywhere they go. Like, they are radical, extravagant seed sowers. And they are constantly setting goals every week of how many people they're going to share the gospel with, and they hit those goals. So some of them may say one person, some of them may say 5. I've got guys, man, that say, I'm going to share with the gospel with 20 people this week, and they hit the goal. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, bro, if our churches prayed and fast like our guys and gals in India, and they threw the seeds of the gospel like our guys and gals in India, we would see radical breakthrough in the West. Just those two things alone, not counting anything else, man. If it was just those two things, we would radically see a difference. And the final thing, Joshua, I would say is that when they get together in small churches, they are putting obedience to King Jesus above everything else. Like, they're not just there to consume and listen to a message and get some feel goodies at the end of the day. They're there to hear the Holy Spirit's voice and immediately obey it as quickly as they can that week. And so an obedience-based discipleship is a radical difference between what we see in India and what we see in America. America really is built on a knowledge-based discipleship. How much knowledge can we gain? How deep can we go? How many commentaries can we listen to? How many amazing devotional videos can we watch? It really is content consumer-driven obedience, or not obedience, content consumer-driven discipleship over obedience. And our guys and gals in India, their number one priority when they get together in a church is loving on each other, taking care of one another, hearing the voice of the Spirit, and immediately obeying whatever he says. And we just don't see that in the West. I mean, no matter what church you attend, rarely does anyone ever expect you to actually immediately go out and do what you just heard. Like, I mean, that even though they want you to, and that would be a goal, it's definitely not highest priority. But in our churches in India and the surrounding countries, man, when they get together every single week, they take time at the end of their meeting to say, this is what I heard the Holy Spirit say. This is what I'm going to do this week. Please hold me accountable to that so that I do what King Jesus said. Like, that just is not a culture that we have in the West many times.
If you didn't know by now, we have created the #1 video courses on starting and scaling a pressure washing company on the market.
That's right. But head knowledge will only take you so far. You need the hands-on experience.
So what we crafted for you guys is an Experience Nashville 3-day boot camp. 2 days in the field, learning everything as it relates to pressure and soft washing and how the systems work, and 1 full day of breakout sessions with Joshua and myself. Visit pressurewashingpastor.com, scroll down till you see a link to my calendar, we will grab a call together and figure out how to get you here to Nashville.
And then we will see you in Nashville.
Back to the show.
A second ago when you got real excited, did you smack the camera?
I did accidentally smack the camera. Yes, I did.
Tim Hawkins said, tastes so good, make you want to smack your mama. When you're talking about Jesus, tastes so good, make you want to smack your camera.
Just smack the camera, man. That's what you got to do. Just, yeah.
Are you familiar with the behavioral interview?
No.
It's like, tell me a time where you saved up for something you really wanted to purchase. You know, you give a behavioral type interview. When you said they throw seeds, would you give us an example of a behavior of throwing a seed?
Yeah, absolutely. So we train every single disciple in all of our churches. Two main pathways of seed sowing. One is through your oikos, which is like your family, friends, people that you know who you know don't know Jesus, right? And so you're being intentional about starting spiritual conversations and sharing the gospel. So earlier on in the podcast, we took a few minutes and shared a quick version of the gospel. So we teach people tools on how they can quickly, in a couple minutes, share the gospel in a succinct, straightforward way. And so throwing a seed would be going ahead and sharing a 2 or 3 minute version of the gospel. Throwing the seed would be having a spiritual conversation where you bring up Jesus. So that's within the oikos. The second pathway is something that we call prayer walking, where it's not the old style of prayer walking where you're just walking around a community praying, hoping nobody talks to you. Okay. This style of prayer walking is going out and praying that God would lead you to people that are open to have spiritual conversations, people you don't know. So you could go to a park or a mall or even Walmart or a Starbucks and sit down at a table or in a neighborhood, and you're basically walking around with maybe 1 or 2 other people, asking the Lord, God, you have promised that the harvest is ready, but the workers are few. We are here to be your workers. We're here to be your hands and feet. Lead us to the ripe harvest. Lead us to people that are ready to have an encounter with you. And so throwing a seed would be stopping and talking to somebody and going ahead and having a spiritual conversation, praying for that person potentially, and sharing the gospel with that person. So for example, sometimes we'll go out in a community, we'll stop and talk to somebody and say, hey, we're out praying for our community. Is there anything we could pray for you about? And see what they say and see if they're open. And if they're open to have prayer, then we'll try to start a spiritual conversation about how they feel about Jesus or how they feel about Christianity or whatever. And just begin to talk and then share the gospel in a simple way. And so I would say, regular seed sowing is having regular spiritual conversations about Jesus. And when opportunity arises, sharing the gospel in a simple, effective way.
So good. What's super hot right now is, what's your one-liner?
Yeah.
Have you heard of this?
I've heard of that. Yeah.
So whether it's EOS or whether it's Donald Miller, or whether it's, you name the business coach, it's all about your one-liner. And the one-liner that you're taught from the coaches and folks who write books is designed to get to the desired outcome of what you want to put. So if you want to sell more books, you end up, make the hero guide, story brand framework. And it's like, instead of throwing the seed of the gospel, we're throwing the seed of ourselves. And it would seem that most of us have been trained how to throw the seed of the world to make much of us, which equals the pride of life, versus how do we throw the seed of the gospel? And what if we started working intentionally with our businesses and start retraining them to renew their minds from what they've learned from the world, the flesh, the devil, to say, you're not here for money. Whoever desires money will never have enough. It will never satisfy. Fame, fortune, the appearance of being sexy, it's like it all fades away. It's about the gospel. What are you doing, business owner? If you're listening, thank you for making it this far. But why don't we train our team members to know how to share the gospel inside of their scripts, inside of their intentional conversations? I think it'd be more powerful. Got a question for you, Josh. It's the last one. We've literally got a few minutes. If there was only one thing that you would want our listeners to know? What's your one thing?
Man, that's a tough question, bro. I've always had a hard time being the one thing guy. You know what I mean? I'm a visionary and all of that. So you're asking for one thing.
I want you to think like this. You get to write your eulogy, but the condition is you only get to leave your family with one thing. It's the last thing. They only remember 10% of it. So even if you share many, what's the one?
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, Joshua, what's going to radically change our perspective and our focus is living our lives in such a way where we are making eternal impact, where eternity is constantly in our minds. And I think that would be the one thing that I would try to leave, is that, because when you begin to focus on eternity every day of your life, that what am I doing today that's going to have eternal significance? What am I doing today that's actually going to last for eternity? It's so easy, man, for us to focus days, weeks, and even months and years on things that literally would be burned up and not last at all. And we spend so much time and energy doing those things. I love John Wesley. He had his, or Jonathan Edwards had his resolutions that he made. One of those two guys, you can pick one of them. One of them had the resolutions, and one of the resolutions was that they will contemplate their death and the eternal impact they're making every single day. That they will take time out of their day in order to focus on the eternal impact that they need to be making. And so, for those of you listening right now, guys. Are we living for eternal significance? Are we living in such a way that is going to last for eternity? And are the things that are our highest priorities, and are the things that we are focused on every day of our lives actually going to matter in eternity? Or are they just going to fall short and be left by the wayside and burned away? I really think that if we can focus our time and energy on the things that eternally matter, then that is going to lead to the most significance. It's going to lead to the most joy, and it's going to lead to the greatest impact long-term possible. And so I'd say that would probably be the one thing, Joshua.
Well, I appreciate you sharing, and I like to put people on the spot at the very end. So you're off the hook with any, thing that you have to spend too much time on. If you could have one person that that you would want to call out to be on the show, they have an incredible testimony. I mean, maybe they're in India, and they would radically transform the way that we think about our story, our lives, and how they make an impact as they go. Who would you want to see on the show?
Oh man, come on, bro. Put me on the spot like that. I've actually got several people that immediately pop to mind that I think would be incredible on the show. Do I name them right now live?
Yeah, we're going to call them out.
Okay. Well, let me say a couple stateside. So guys that I think would be great for your audience, especially who are not only business owners, but kingdom-minded business owners that have shifted everything. A buddy of mine named Chris Galanos, he wrote the book From Mega Church to Multiplication, but he also is an incredible tent maker that makes sure that all of his people are taken care of financially, and him and himself. Chris Galanos would be incredible. I've got a friend named Brett Snodgrass who leads a real estate company in Indiana, but he also leads a men's ministry where he's trying to pour into Christian businessmen who is awesome as well. And then globally, I would say we have my father-in-law, actually, Dr. Ajay Lal. He started the ministry, Central India Christian Mission. And some of the stuff that they went through early on in order to get their organization off the ground and to plant churches is crazy persecution and crazy difficulty that led to exponential fruit. And he is an incredible Indian leader who I think would be incredible. So I'll throw three names out there at the beginning. I'll email you some more, Joshua, that I think are good too. But those three would be the first that come to mind.
Yeah, thank you for that. We don't get the opportunity to really hear from people that are I thought there's amazing people around, but we don't know who they are and what they're doing. Let's give them a place to be shown, to be seen, to be heard, because whatever we platform, we get more of. But we need to platform more difference makers inside of business, inside of communities. So thank you for your time today. I look forward to being introduced, and thank you for calling them out, putting them on the spot, putting the heat on. And until next time, peace.